Mr. Duato, in 2021, Janssen constructed an exclusionary contract with their PBMs to protect Remicade, their blockbuster drug, a treatment for ulcerative colitis, very familiar with it, a wonderful drug, changed the outcome for people with UC. But this deal protected Remicade from competition by a new biosimilar, Inflectra, which was launched at a 16% lower cost than Remicade. Now, I understand this is confidential in terms of the settlement with the courts. And by the way, let me just say, this involves a rebate wall. So for the sake of those who are watching, a rebate wall is an anti-competitive tool which can be used to restrict a competitor's entry into a formulary. A manufacturer would offer more significant rebates to a health plan through a PBM for access to the formulary, contingent upon the PBM blocking a biosimilar. Now, we have been discussing the promise of biosimilars to lower the cost in a market-oriented, competitive way. So if we're not going to have government regulation, we've got to have a market situation, and the market would be a biosimilar, but this sort of arrangement blocked the biosimilar from entering. So, in the full support of a market-oriented approach, do any of your current contracts employ rebate walls to prevent lower-cost biosimilars from formulary access?
We welcome biosimilars and generics. We believe it's an integral part of the system. As a matter of fact, in the US, 90% of the prescriptions are biosimilars and generics, and that's one of the reasons pharmaceutical expenses have remained flat or increased single-digit during the last years. We believe that biosimilars and generic foster patient access, and we care deeply about that. And we don't.
But let me ask, because my specific question: do any of your current contracts employ rebate walls?
Our current contracts do not employ any technique to avoid biosimilars and generics to have uptake in the market.
Okay, thank you. Now, I think at least two of you, maybe all three of you, are working on gene therapy. I've been concerned that we don't really know how we're going to price those. And I think one of the concerns is that there will not be a market force to lower the cost of an initial gene therapy, which are incredible. It's amazing the lifetime benefit that gene therapy can create. But I was speaking to a medical director of Medicaid CMO, and he was telling me that the pharmaceutical cost related to Medicaid is now 35%, where formerly it was like 25 or 30%. And he says it's being driven by gene therapy. And when sickle cell comes widely spread, it's going I don't know how it's going to be priced, but my state has a lot of sicklers. I don't know how my state's going to be able to afford giving it to everybody who should have access. So very concisely, how are we going to show restraint on the price of some of these new gene therapies, which already is driving up Medicaid? So again, 35% of Medicaid is now pharmaceutical cost. Mr. Berner, I'll start with you.
Senator, we actually don't work in gene therapy.
Oh, then let me go to Davis. Mr. Davis?
We actually do not work in gene therapy.
Oh, I thought I saw you had a press release that y'all were doing so. You had a vector or something.
No, we're doing some very basic research, but we have nothing in advanced stages.
Mr. Duato?
We do have a gene therapy served for treating inherited retinal diseases, and we support legislation in order to be able to do value-based contracts in the case of gene therapy. So we welcome legislation in order to be able to have value-based contracts.
And that's good. Value-based contracting will be important, but it still doesn't address the opening cost. Because if the opening cost is sky high, you see where I'm going with that. Now, what would you give to us who believe in markets a solution to an opening price that would be so much it would be difficult for society to afford the gene therapy? And I could put in any other drug, but let's just start with gene therapy.
We have to look at the value of these therapies and the fact that gene therapy for inherited retinal diseases may affect only less than 1,000 people in the world. So we have to understand that, and you can rest assured that if we are fortunate enough to bring this solution, that people that has diseases that can lead to blindness will sit down and evaluate very thoroughly our pricing in order to make sure that all patients that need this therapy are able to afford it.
I think I recall a couple of years ago there was a study that was shown, respected, you probably know it better than I, that $2 million for gene therapy for ultra-rare diseases was a reasonable sort of, it would cover the cost, it would create the incentive to produce more. And that would be for the ultra-rare, where presumably you wouldn't have the ability to produce more. You know, obviously the more you produce, you get a little bit extra profit. You know where I'm going with that. So, but that shows restraint, if you will, on the behalf of the manufacturer. Now, we want to create incentive, but we want to be able to provide access. And without access, it's as if the drug has never been invented. So is there any other thoughts you have on how society, if that's ultra-rare, $2 million, presumably if it's not ultra-rare, it would be less. How can we have a market-oriented approach to this? Because I truly am concerned about the ability of a Medicaid program to be able to afford some of these gene therapies.
We care deeply about our medicines getting to the patients that need it, especially in these, as you have mentioned, ultra-rare diseases that have therapy can have life-changing consequences. So we will always sit down and make sure that the way we price is reflective of the value of the medicine, but also importantly, it enables affordability and it makes it possible that every patient that's needed in America
Now,
can
the
get it.
affordability, though, we're defining affordability for the patient. So if Medicaid covers it, it's by definition affordable for the patient, or if insurance does. But then that doesn't necessarily make it affordable for society. And society's got to pay for it, and obviously Medicaid is taking more and more of a state's budget, and frankly more and more of the federal budget. I'm not sure there's an answer there, but let me just challenge you, because we want market-oriented solutions. And we want to create incentives so that good companies like the three of you and others are making these new things. But if my state goes bankrupt paying for a new gene therapy, then my state's, the taxpayer, we all are in tough shape. Let me just go to one more thing. There's evidence that pharmaceutical companies will do life cycle management kind of to prolong the sort of exclusivity of a drug. And some have argued that that actually defeats innovation, because as opposed to making profit from innovation, you can make profit from life cycle management. Any thoughts about that, Mr. Berner?
Senator, I think life cycle management, if you think about the extension of new indications for a product, is incredibly important to really being able to deliver additional benefits to patients. Obviously, the patents associated with any product will dictate when a generic enters. We have been in favor of a robust generic entry primarily because our focus is on innovative products. But think, for example, in cancer, where typically you start the treatment of cancer very late in disease, learn more about how the drug works, show it's safe, but ultimately you can bring that into early stage cancer where you have the potential to potentially cure patients. Now that takes quite a bit of time, but that's an example of a life cycle management where you are actually showing the true potential of a medicine. I would hate for us to cut off the opportunity to show those benefits. At the same time, we should be, as an industry, welcoming of generic competition, because ultimately our focus as a company is to take resources as we get close to generic entry and focus those resources on the next wave of new product innovation, which is where I think we ultimately want to go for patients.
Mr. Davis, you got 20 seconds, ma'am. How would you do it?
Well, the short answer is, as I look at it, one, we very much support generic drugs and biosimilar drugs. I think it's the core of how our system works. We have a period where we're protected, we are able to recoup our investment, and then society benefits in perpetuity beyond that. As we look at life cycle management, we always are asking, are we bringing value to the patient? I'll give you a live example. If you look at Keytruda now, as I mentioned, is in 39 indications across 17 tumor types. It is revolutionizing the care of patients facing cancer. The reality of it is still only 30% of people show overall response. So as great as it is, patients are still suffering. And what we are doing is investing in combination therapies to be able to extend and go beyond that 30%, which means much better benefit and value to the patients that will ultimately use those drugs.
Thank you.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank